Welcome to the Therapy Show podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Mustard. In each episode, I interview a seasoned and knowledgeable talk therapist from the counseling world to glean valuable insights, techniques, and tools that you can apply to your practice and your life. And if you're considering a career in the counseling field or just want to hear about what it's like to be a talk therapist, then this is the podcast for you. Hey friends, before I jump into this week's episode, I wanted to share something with you that's been brewing within me for quite some time now. When I began podcasting, I wanted to focus on talk therapy topics and issues, yet I'm also really passionate about another topic, which is helping women live their best lives as they move into midlife. You may or may not know this about me, but when I hit 40, that's when I made the decision to start living my life differently. So for the past 7 years, I've worked really hard to live more authentically and congruently. And now I want to start bringing this information to the podcast. And I'm lining up guests that will not only inspire you to see midlife differently, but will also bring you the know-how on how to do so. I'm unsure yet if I will start a whole new podcast or rebrand this one. And podcasts, y'all, are a lot of work. And it's just me right now behind the scenes. Well, except for my audio engineer and editor, Laura. Hey, Laura. I know you're listening. So creating them and producing two separate podcasts feels overwhelming. Yet also at the same time, it feels really possible. So right now, I'm just hanging out in the land of possibilities as last week's guest, Bill O'Hanlon, encourages. All right, so let's tell you about this week's episode, Stop Emotional Eating and Heal Your Relationship with Food with Laura Buckley. Laura is a registered dietitian who coaches big-hearted helpers and healers in eating for health and energy balance. In this week's episode, we talk about what is emotional eating, why awareness of your thoughts and feelings is key when it comes to changing eating behaviors, a framework for therapists to use when working with those dealing with emotional eating, how to manage our energy as helping professionals, and we also have a few tips sprinkled in the show for teaching kids healthy eating habits. Plus, Laura is going to give us the energy supplements that she highly recommends. We hope you enjoy this episode. Well, hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Therapy Show. I'm your host, Lisa Mustard, and today's guest is Laura Buckley. Welcome to the show, Laura. I'm excited to have you here.
Thank you, Lisa. So excited to be here.
Yeah, me too. This topic is one that is near and dear to my heart. I know you and I spoke previously about some of the stuff that, I've been through with emotional eating and body image stuff. So when you and I connected, I was so excited to have you come on the show and talk a little bit about emotional eating and how to have a healthy relationship with food. But before we jump into all of that, can you share with our audience a little bit about who you are, what you do, and who you help?
Yeah, of course. So hello, everybody. So grateful to be here. I am a registered dietitian. I've been a dietitian now for 16 years. I started my career in the Army. So I went right into the Army and served as a dietitian in the military for 8 years before transitioning into coaching and private practice and really helping people shift their relationship with food. I had a long-term struggle with emotional eating and just couldn't really get my own relationship with food where I knew it should be, even as a dietitian. Mm-hmm. And so once I figured that out, I was like, all right, this is what I'm meant to be sharing. And so I help people, in particular, what I say are big-hearted helpers and healers. So people who spend a lot of their time helping other people. How do they kind of manage their energy, manage their own well-being so that they can have a healthy relationship with food?
And you are speaking right to us talk therapists.
Yes.
Because we are those big-hearted helpers. So this will be a great, great conversation. What is emotional eating? Maybe that's...
Yeah, I think that's a great place to start. So I think of emotional eating, I look at it almost as like a three-pronged situation. Mm-hmm. So one is when we eat and we're not hungry. I call that eating outside of hunger. So when we go and we're looking for a snack and we're just kind of browsing for food, even though we don't have that physical feeling of hunger. Okay. And then the other way I think about it, or another way I think about it, is what I call eating past fullness. So it's when we've had enough to eat, but we just keep eating until we're pretty much stuffed. And I try to call that eating past fullness as opposed to overeating, because overeating comes with some judgment. Mm-hmm. And I think it's really important to understand that when we eat past fullness or we eat when we're not hungry, we're still eating for a reason. We just need to know what that reason is. And then the other way I look at it is when we have a very intense craving, in particular for higher fat, higher sugar foods. When we are craving those things, it's a really good chance that that craving is being driven from an emotional place, not from a physical need place.
Okay. That's so helpful. I can identify when I've been in every single one of those scenarios for sure. Okay. That's
Yeah.
really helpful. So when somebody comes to you and they are struggling with one of those three, what is it that you do to kind of help them understand like the process, like what's going on? What does that look like?
So awareness really is one of the key first steps.
Mhm.
We just need to bring some awareness into why this is happening. Because a lot of people come to me and they're like, I'm just so out of control. I just can't do it. I've tried everything. And we just don't understand where it's coming from.
Mhm.
So the first step is really to gain that insight, gain that awareness. What is driving this behavior?
Okay.
And so I help people start just tuning back into their bodies. So much of what we do with emotional eating is on autopilot. It's just, we've gotten into such a habit, such a routine. I've people who come to me and they're like, I was eating the cheese and crackers before I even realized I was reaching for food. Like it just can happen so quickly.
Mhm.
And so bringing it back into or getting into some awareness around what physical hunger feels like. So retuning into our body, remembering what it feels like to be physically hungry.
Mhm.
When we eat on an emotional level for a long time, we can almost miss our own hunger signals. So it's about coming back into what does physical hunger feel like? And then recognizing. So one of the keys, I think, is sort of knowing what you want to eat and then recognizing what you want to eat instead of that, like what you had planned on. So I was going to eat a salad, but now I want pizza.
Mhm.
What is happening in that moment where I'm making the decision
Mhm.
to eat pizza instead of salad? What are the thoughts? What am I feeling? What am I experiencing that's making that pizza feel irresistible?
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, complete sense. So it definitely makes sense to me.
Right.
Awareness of like what's going on, like what's happening. And I agree with you. I think a lot of people, they feel out of control and they
Yeah.
felt like that for so long that it's like on autopilot and they don't quite get that they're not aware. It's
Right.
like a denial maybe in some ways that works for them.
It does.
They just are in that place. Okay, that's really great. So you start with the awareness tool or the awareness piece. And
Yeah.
then what do you guys do next?
So, with that, one of the things I think is really important to just kind of recognize is that learning is going to happen through reflection first. So, when you're through this moment where you went and you ate something that you didn't want to eat,
Mhm.
whatever the circumstance was, it's just looking back on it with some compassion and just saying, hey, what was going on?
Yeah.
Right. And then we get to a point where we do that a couple times. We'll get to a point where we can catch ourselves more like in the moment.
Right. Yeah.
And I can stop and say, okay, what's going on right now?
Yeah.
And then we'll eventually progress to the point where we can catch ourselves ahead of time and redirect.
Yeah.
I often tell people if you're in that moment and you recognize, okay, I'm going to eat for a reason other than hunger, what we need to identify are some of the things that create a soothing effect for you other than food.
Mhm.
Right? What can we do? We can take that 5 to 10 minutes that you would have spent having a snack. What are some of the things that bring you back into a place of greater ease and comfort without food?
Mhm. That's great. That's a great tip and a great way to look at it because it reminds me of a lot of what we do in therapy. We want you to take a break. If you're, and I was just trying, I was going to that place in my head of like when I have an argument with my husband, because that's
Yeah.
probably where I learned that skill the most of, okay, what's just going on with me? Why am I being triggered? I don't have to respond right now. It would actually be a good thing for me to go in the other room and catch my breath and think about, okay, where did this come from? So it's an applicable skill that once you learn it, hallelujah, we can apply it to all things in our lives. Isn't that awesome?
Everything. Yeah. Anything that creates that disruption of the autopilot. So in any other, and I love like that analogy is perfect because it's that same like, okay, I'm triggered.
Mhm.
If I just catch it before I respond to it,
Yeah.
then I can redirect it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, that's great. That makes so much sense to me. So this is so helpful. Okay, and do you find that kind of the folks that you work with, this shows up not just with food, but maybe other areas of their lives? Like it kind of,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah. That's what I
Yeah, I
thought
mean,
too.
it shows up in a lot of areas. And I think it's so important to address emotional eating, not just try to change the
Mhm.
diet. Because if I go to eat differently, but I haven't taken care of the emotional piece of it, then, well, actually, this is exactly what happened for me. I went to eat differently and I didn't address the emotional piece of it. And so I just turned to alcohol, and that really wasn't effective, right? That did not get me any further along where I wanted to be. But we see that, right? We see a readjustment to something else that may not be any healthier.
Right. Yeah. We just look for another thing to replace it.
Yeah.
We have to address what's really going on, like what's underneath.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. We're speaking the same language. We do similar things, like the whole awareness piece, the what's triggering me, the emotions behind it, the thoughts that kind of go into all of this. Okay. So let's kind of transition a little bit, because I know there's therapists out there listening who go, well, I'm sitting with clients and they don't necessarily fit the diagnosis of an eating disorder. However, they realize that emotional eating is tripping them up, and they're using it as a behavior to not maybe deal with other stuff.
Sure.
We can definitely, I'm sure there are plenty of therapists who are skilled with working with this, but maybe for someone who's new to a client with this emotional eating stuff going on, how would you help that therapist kind of theorize or give them some skills to work with that client?
I think that I always say eating is actually a wonderful tool for gaining insight into the mind.
Okay.
So when somebody who has emotional eating and they're working on that, they generally have a good sense of what nutrition is, right? A lot of people who are in that emotional eating and they sort of know it have tried a lot of things. So they have some familiarity with nutrition. So assuming that the person has some sense around what they would like to be eating is helping them really identify what is going on in that moment when you want to make the other choice.
Okay.
It really is coming down to just noticing what your mind is saying that's making it acceptable to choose the pizza. Like, we all have things that our brain tells us, like, I'll do better tomorrow. It's not really worth it. It's not going to make a difference.
Yeah. Right.
So it's about catching those thoughts first.
Yeah.
Because then all we have to say, well, is that really true?
Right.
Right. Is that the thought I want to have right now? But I think when we're talking about therapists who are then working with our people who want to stop emotional eating, it is about identifying, like, when we don't eat, then what's all the stuff that's going to come up? Right? Like, what are the things that are going to reveal themselves because they're not being dealt with?
Right.
But I think because when we can create that disrupt, when we can create that space, it allows us to say, yeah, it's not food, it's this other thing that then, and you can make, I believe truly, and I think I experienced it myself, we can make a lot more progress when we don't have the food, because we're sort of forced to look at things a little bit more quickly.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So let's talk about that, because it reminds me a lot of alcoholics and addiction. So when we take away the drug, we take away the chemical, and we're able to really do the work, that's where we can really heal. So
yeah,
I can definitely understand that. Okay. So you told me something before we started recording that has my curiosity like really, really piqued, because I think this is kind of where the education and the trying new things kicks in. You said something, emotional eating, a lot of it has to do with energy shifting or
energy management.
Energy management. Can you talk about that? I find that fascinating, because looking back over it, I'm like, yeah, Laura, that's what it is. But that's what it was.
That is exactly what it is, right? Yeah. I always say, like, if I could just call it energy management, I would. But we have to warm up to that one usually.
Yeah. But I get it. Like, it makes sense. So talk to them about that. I find that fascinating.
I think so much about, especially for these heart-centered helpers and healers that we are, right? We spend so much time giving our energy to our clients, and then to our families, and then maybe to our audiences if we're on social media or wherever we're showing up. And it's so important to recognize how that energy feels in our bodies so that we can dissipate it, ground it, come back to a place of feeling more centered. Because when we feel more centered, there's not that driver to go eat from, like, sort of like, I call it my untethered energy. If I'm not managing my energy well, I can feel it's like really big and it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And so it comes down to how do I manage my own energy? And, some of it's through getting energy out, just through exercise and making sure I have enough time for that self-care to get my body moving. And some of it is really just about allowing it and recognizing it and seeing where we need more energy or less energy. Because when we're emotionally eating, oftentimes it's to help with quieting the energy in our body.
Yeah.
And when our energy is low, then of course, shifting our eating can help re-energize us and help our energy come back up.
I like that. I really like that. So it's about being aware of your energy and managing your energy throughout the day and finding those times or the areas that you can work on yourself, like take care of your own needs, your basic need to eat.
Your basic needs. Exactly. And I say, so I work with a lot of healthcare providers, and one of the things we work on is really just taking 2 minutes between clients to breathe, to shift that energy, into your belly and out of your chest, and just doing a little bit of grounding for yourself before we get back into another energy exchange with another client.
Yeah.
It's about, and so often we don't, unless we really make that conscious effort, we don't think about it because we want to get our charting done. We want to get the note done. We want to,
right.
We're trying to jam it in.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that can just leave us feeling almost revved up and depleted at the same time.
Yeah. I can totally relate to that. I know those feelings so well. And on one hand, it's kind of like this really weird high that you can get. Like you're busy, you're helping people, you have all these things to do, you're needed, you're getting all this, you're just go, go, go. And then the other side of it is you can just collapse from it.
Yeah.
If you don't space out your energy well. And for me, that was really a trial and error kind of thing.
Yeah.
I almost didn't realize that it was happening until after it happened. And then it was like, what just happened for my day? And so it does take so much reflection, and it takes so much awareness. And, I don't know how many therapists I've heard say, well, I just don't have time in my day to get it all done.
Right.
But I do think that things are shifting for folks who recognize that it's not doing well. First of all, it's not helping themselves, and it's not helping their clients if they don't have the energy to show up for them. Hey friend, want to be more comfortable while sitting on the therapy couch? I sure did, and went looking for pants and tops that were soft, wrinkle resistant, and would match just about anything I already had in my closet. And now Zyia Active makes up about 80% of my wardrobe. Would you like to learn more? Head over to my site, lisamustard.com, and click on the activewear tab. And don't think this is just for women. They have men's and kids' clothes too. And our family is loving the quality, and I am loving the price tags. So head over to my site to check it all out. So this is really, really a great conversation. What about the idea of having a healthy relationship with food? Is that a similar type of thought process for you? Do you do a lot of the similar things with folks when they come to you for that?
I think a lot about how we think about the different foods in our life, because it's about removing some of those labels of good foods, bad foods, healthy foods, unhealthy foods. Like I've started putting healthy in air quotes.
Yeah. Right.
Like, what does that even mean anymore? No, I'm just kidding. But, it's about looking at food as food that fuels my body, and food that I eat for entertainment, or I eat for enjoyment, or I eat for pleasure, which is fine, right? There is nothing wrong with eating for pleasure. We're human. We're built to eat for pleasure.
Yeah.
It's just choosing foods for pleasure less often than we choose foods to fuel our body. And honestly, part of it's just being honest with ourselves about why we're choosing a food.
True.
I often ask people, like, are we eating for our taste buds or are we eating for our body? Neither answer's wrong.
Right. Yeah.
It's just about knowing.
Yeah.
And is it about saying, is this food? I talk a lot about eating for future self. And so it's talking about eating for, is this going to make me feel the way Laura wants to feel in 20 minutes? Is this going to help me reach the goals that I want to reach in a month, whatever?
Yeah.
And sometimes the answer is like, I'm just going to eat this because in 5 minutes, it's going to taste really good. And that's okay, but not having judgment around that. It's about removing the judgment, letting it be okay. Because the truth is, when we spend less time judging ourselves about what we're eating, we can just have such a healthier relationship with food. We can enjoy our food more. We can eat without thinking there's going to be the side effect of the negative self-talk.
Yeah. I really like
So
that.
a lot of it, again, comes back to that awareness, just being really real with ourselves and not letting a food be bad. Because if you say a food is bad, then you're saying I'm bad because I ate that food.
Right. Yeah, totally get that. I know what you mean. So don't put labels on food as being good or bad. Food is food. Some is
Food is food.
Food, food for fuel, food for pleasure. I really like how you put those into context. I think that's really helpful. And I think a lot of the times this is new information for people because, we grow up in a household where, depending on the generation your parents grew up in, food is either it was hard to get, or it's a luxury and everybody has it, or, there's so much stuff around food, and our parents do the best they can with what they know, and they're doing the best they can. So they do put that on us as kids, and we, so many things happen around the dinner table or the supper, whatever you want to call it. So we take those experiences forward and we put them into our present day lives. And we have judgments around them. We have meaning-making experiences around things. We can hear our parents' voices, or we can hear their judgment, when we eat something or we don't eat something. And it can be really hard to, when you're trying to teach, and this is just me, like trying to teach kids like healthy eating behavior, not to make them crazy in the process, if that makes sense. Like, I want my girls to eat for fuel, but I also want them to learn how to enjoy foods in moderation and just eat for pleasure as well. It's a balance. Do you have any thoughts or ideas around that?
Yeah, I think what you said is so important. What our families model for us is so what we'll bring forward, right? So really, one, talking about food less, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So there is talking about food differently, but there's also just talking about food like way less. I grew up in a house where we talked about food, we talked about weight, we talked about that a lot. And I think that sometimes just making it less of a big deal is what's so helpful.
Yeah.
But also really honoring the food that we do eat for fuel more than we focus on the foods that are for pleasure.
Gotcha.
Like really being involved even with, if anybody gardens, like just being involved with the process of food and, just really honoring just the nutrient content of fruits and vegetables and, whole foods. And maybe even if you have children, talking about why you choose whole foods more often and just the benefits of those foods, as opposed to focusing on the foods that we want to choose less. Although, I think one thing I will say, just as a little bit of an exception to that, is I do think that when it comes to sugar, it's good to talk about like just the natural sugars and including them, but not wanting to have things that are high in sugar because they can cause a lot of disruptions. So I'm okay with saying like, I'm going to choose this because it's less sugar. Not villainify.
Yeah. Right.
Not making sugar the bad guy.
Right.
But just noting that I will choose something that is lower in sugar because it feels better in my body.
Right. Yeah. I like how you phrase that. And that's, just between you and me and everybody listening, that's kind of how we approach it too, is, looking at desserts and a lot of processed food that has sugar in it, your body's just not going to feel good versus having some watermelon or some berries or a banana. Like, there's a difference. Now, I know that the Pop-Tarts taste good. I know those cookies taste really good, but let's think about how do you want to feel in 20 minutes? And then, the health implications of too much sugar in your body is not good, can lead to so many things. So yeah, I like how you talk about that. Just talking about it less too is not making it such a big deal or harping on it, because that makes them think about it. Well, every meal or every snack is a to-do, or it's now I have to like really think about this, and it's just food. It's fuel.
Food.
Like I
always tell people when we talk about emotional eating and healing your relationship with food, it's about freedom of having to think about it all the time.
Yeah.
It's not, diets shouldn't make you think about food more.
Right.
The whole goal is to think about it less. We're so used to focusing on it, focusing on the numbers, focusing on the foods, when really, when we can reduce our stress around food, we're going to have a better outcome, which means thinking about it less and feeling much more free.
Yeah.
The other thing that I think about when it comes to desserts in terms of building that healthy relationship is I really don't believe that dessert should be reward. I don't think food should ever be like a reward or a punishment. And I am not a fan of the clean plate club. So I'm like, you don't have to finish your dinner if you want to have dessert.
Right.
Eat what you eat for dinner. You can eat the dessert. If you're still hungry after dessert, you're going back to dinner. We're not going to have like seconds of dessert.
Right. Yeah.
But I try. And when my son was little, I was totally guilty of like using chocolate to bribe him into the car every now and then. But generally speaking, trying not to use food as a reward. Yeah.
No, I hear you for sure. And I think that's really wise. We work really hard not to do that as well. I think and I like how you said, I say that to the girls all the time, like, well, first of all, you got to eat your vegetables. Like you have to eat the vegetables. If they don't finish other areas, I don't force it on them. The vegetable thing I kind of harp on because I feel like you got to get your fiber in and you have to expand your palate. And I'm not making 3 different vegetables for 3 different people. Just because one kid wants this or the other one wants that. It's like, no, we have to expand our palate and try new things. I mean, I don't like force it down their throat, but you got to at least try it kind of thing. So that's really helpful. I think a lot of moms out there maybe needed to hear that. Moms, therapists, dads too. I think that's really helpful to know that dessert is a pleasure. We don't have dessert every night. Like it's not a common thing.
Yeah, neither do we.
Yeah. And I think our girls are getting old enough to know like tonight I'm going to choose fruit over a brownie. So that's kind of a cool thing to see as they get older, kind of shifting their choices.
Yeah.
That's cool. So tell us a little bit about, who you work with once again and how people can find you if they want to learn more about what you offer.
Oh, yeah, sure. So I work mostly with, like I said, big-hearted helpers and healers, people who are in service to other people and who are ready to put some of the focus back on themselves, whether they're feeling at that point where they're like, I just can't, like my favorite statement is like, something's got to give, right? Like I can't keep going the way I'm going if I don't do something for myself. So that's who I work with. I am on Facebook and Instagram at Laura Buckley Coaching.
Okay.
In both areas. And my website is laurabuckleycoaching.com. So I'm Laura Buckley Coaching everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you have some resources on your website, if I recall, that folks can download. Is that right?
I do. I have 2. So one is called 3 Simple Exercises to Shift Emotional Eating. And there are 3 things you can start doing right away to start building that awareness, gaining that insight, and making some different choices. So I love that one specifically related to emotional eating. I also have one called the 10-Minute Morning Makeover, because I truly believe the way we start our day sets the stage for how the rest of our day goes. Yeah. And so it's just a 10-minute customizable routine that you can set up for your own morning so that you can start your morning off with a more grounded, energetic place. Nice. It goes back to that energy management. It's sort of managing your energy right from the get-go instead of trying to kind of circle back and reset.
Yeah, I love those downloads. We will definitely link in the show notes. So if folks want to just go straight there, they can. I have one more question for you, and I don't know what your answer is going to be to this. When it comes to energy and things that we can do to supplement our energy in a healthy way, that's not like a Monster energy drink or something.
Right.
What do you recommend for energy?
For supplementation in particular? Yeah. Curious. No, I think that's a great question. So I start with a couple very basic things. When we are in sort of a constant stress state, we deplete a lot of our B vitamins. And so activated B complex, the activated part is very important because it's the form of B vitamin that's actually usable in our body.
Okay.
But activated B complex is where I start with most people because we deplete those so quickly and they are important for every energy reaction in our body.
Cool.
For somebody who's been experiencing prolonged stress and that's what's really depleting the energy, I do recommend ashwagandha or another adaptogen type, rhodiola, holy basil. There's a few out there, but ashwagandha is probably the most well-known one. And that should actually be paired with the activated B complex because the B complex is a precursor to the ashwagandha. Those are probably my go-tos. I also often recommend omega-3s for people who are experiencing some low energy.
Yeah. It's funny. I love, I've been taking adaptogens for years, so I can get on board with that really, really easily.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Do you have a particular brand that you like?
I do. So I actually use a brand in my practice.
Okay.
It's a brand called Nutrimetrics.
Oh, okay. Just
So
curious.
if you have any questions, if you want a link to that, I'd be happy to share that as well.
Yeah, we'll put that in the show notes.
It's a great, I just love it. I love everything about the product.
And you don't have to be an RD to get it. Anybody can order.
Yeah. No, anybody can order.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we'll definitely link that in the show notes because I noticed a difference with adaptogens when I turn like 40 and just kind of a little bit of, and it kind of waxes and wanes. I mean, I think a lot of it depends on stress level and what I ate the day before and, alcohol, all that stuff. But adaptogens were kind of like this happy little thing that I came across a while back. And so I'm glad to hear you recommend them because I really do like taking adaptogens. So that's cool.
Yeah, I mean, the combination of B complex and adaptogens changed so much for me. Like I was more clear, I was more energetic, I felt more balanced. It's huge. I mean, I think that those supports are essential.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well,
and of course, the ultimate supplement, water. Just make sure you're drinking plenty of water.
I know, right? How can we forget about water? But that's seriously, I can forget about it. I can totally forget about drinking my water. So I'm glad that you brought that up because everybody, that's really important. You need your water.
Need your water.
We do, and we forget, But I think for therapists, it's funny. Like we drink so much water, we're like, got to go to the bathroom, and in between each session, you see them all in the hallway. It's kind of funny. How we all work in 45 minutes, 15-minute rotations. Well, thank you so much, Laura, for coming on the show. This has been so helpful and I've learned so much. Is there anything else you want to share with the audience?
I can't think of anything, but thank you so much. It's just been such a pleasure to talk with you.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, no, I really enjoyed it. I'm so glad that we connected. So thanks for being on the show.
Thank you.
Well, that wraps up another episode of The Therapy Show with Lisa Mustard. I know there are hundreds of thousands of podcasts out there, and I'm thankful you've chosen to listen to mine. Be sure to visit lisamustard.com to access the show notes and discover more fantastic content. And I'd be grateful if you subscribe to the show. Thank you.